Hello, and welcome back to Talking Sit, an animal behaviour and training podcast. My name's Jade. I am a certificated clinical animal behaviourist, and I am your host. And this week I have been chatting to the wonderful Rachel Rodgers. Now, Rachel is a collie expert. So we've been talking about everything border collies, from choosing the right one to raising a healthy puppy to tackling behaviour problems when they're older. And I think that whether you have a collie or not, you'll find this super interesting. But if you are a collie guardian, this one is for you. I hope that you learn a ton and you go forward and have a, I guess, easier, more informed, and more empowered relationship with your collie. Enjoy. Hello, welcome, Rachel.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
You are most welcome. Would you mind starting by introducing yourself? So tell people a little bit about who you are, how we know each other, what your kind of specialty is.
Yes, no worries. So I'm Rachel Rodgers. I'm a clinical animal behaviourist and trainer specialising in border collies, although I do see other breeds as well, but most of my clients own collies. I know Jade from completing the clinical animal behaviour master's course at Lincoln, which was fantastic. Probably the best thing I've ever done, actually.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was so good. Yeah, so I live in Lincolnshire.
You're in the thick of collie country up in Lincolnshire. I very rarely get collies, so hopefully I'll get a few more once we've had this chat today. So
Well, actually, I don't. It's not really collie country. No, there's not many here. It's more Labradors and Spaniels. It's because there's not many sheep here. It's all agriculture. So a lot of the collies are more sort of up north, where there's the hills and sheep.
cool. But you consult online as well, don't you? So do you get them from all
Yes,
over the
yeah,
country?
yeah, all over the world actually. Yeah, I'm seeing several in America and all sorts. So. Yeah, it's
There you go.
mostly online. Some in person, which is always nice, but mostly online. Yeah,
Oh, cool. So at the end, we'll sort of give your links out and everything so that anyone that has a crazy collie that needs some help can find you easily.
that would be fun. Thank you.
So, first things first, Rachel, I get everybody to just tell me a little bit about their pets. So, tell me about who you share your life with.
Right, so there's quite a few. So I have Gail, who's an 11, nearly 11, end of this month, year-old border collie. She's lovely. She unfortunately has epilepsy, which a lot of collies suffer from, but she's only just started with that. So yeah, but she's gorgeous, very laid back, very chilled, lovely, easy collie, which is rare. I also have Flo, who is a 5-year-old border collie, short-coated. She's the extreme opposite to Gail. Very high drive, very into everything, very high prey drive. Very difficult to work on sheep because she's just so into it, and she just switches off for the first 5 minutes. After that, she's the best sheepdog ever, but it's those first 5 minutes that are difficult with her. So yeah, she has hip dysplasia, which is another issue that many collies get that we can talk about later. And that's really starting to limit her now, which is really sad. But yeah, and I think because of the hip dysplasia, she also has reactivity issues. She's not reactive, that's the wrong word. But if other dogs come up to her, she'll snap to send them away because she's worried about being knocked, and she can be fearful in certain situations, which I think as well is related to the hip problem. And then I have Ozzy, who is 2.5, golden and white, or they call it EE, red and white border collie. He's wonderful. He's from Showlines. He's not particularly laid back, but he's lovely, very inquisitive, really needy, always wanted cuddles, which is again quite not always that common in collies. Having said he always wants cuddles, he wants to be near me, but he doesn't always want cuddles. He's not a cuddly dog, but he does always want to be right next to me in my face. So he's lovely. We're still working through adolescent things with him. He's entire, so he's not always keen on other male dogs, but fine with everyone else. Yeah, and then sadly last year we lost Esther, who was my 7-year-old border collie that helped me with my sheep, my pet sheep, which I'll come to in a minute. And that was
Oh,
awful. She was only 7 and she had liver failure.
oh, I'm so sorry.
And we found out and then lost her about about a month after we found out. It was awful. It was awful. And she was such a
Oh,
lovely dog. She was another very easy dog and she was just wonderful with the
mm-hmm.
sheep. Yeah, so that was
Oh.
horrible. Still getting over that.
This episode can be in Esther's memory.
Oh,
I'm
thank
very sorry
you.
to hear that.
Yeah, she was lovely.
So you have sheep as well, and you work them on the sheep?
Yes, we have 18 pet sheep. Yes, Gail helps with the sheep, but Gail, if a sheep challenges her, so if a sheep just sort of stands there and stares at her head on and refuses to move, she can't cope with that at all and pretends she hasn't seen it and goes round it and herds the rest. So, but she's okay. She helps, but I'm on the hunt at the moment for another collie that can help me with the sheep. Yeah, because Flo's
Cool.
can't now because of her hips. So, but yeah, I have my 17 pet sheep. I said 18 earlier, and I've just remembered we sold one to the 17, and they're lovely. They've all got individual personalities, but I won't go into all those on here.
Oh, I'd love that. We could do another sort of, personally, I don't like calling them livestock, but farm animal. We could do a farm
Oh
animal
yes,
episode one day and I'll get you back on.
I'd love to do that. Yeah, I'd love to do that. That would be amazing because they're so overlooked, and they have just as many personalities as dogs do. They're just the same. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
absolutely. No, I can totally believe that. So let's kind of set the theme then. Like, if somebody had never heard of a border collie and they were like, what is a border collie? What would you say?
okay, I would say they can be very sensitive but very loving companions. They're not always particularly hands on dogs, so they often like to be close to you but not being hugged. Some do. They're not ever so resilient. So, if in the first couple of years they encounter something really difficult, so they get attacked by a dog or they have an unfortunate incident involving people, then that can make them more anxious about people or other dogs. So that's something to bear in mind. It can be really difficult going through adolescence and in puppyhood. But if you put the work in and once you get through that early stage, then they're absolutely wonderful dogs. They're just the best. They're wonderful companions, very sensitive, pick up on moods, and yeah, they're just lovely. Yeah, I couldn't have a different dog, I don't think, now, a different breed.
Oh, bless you. I personally would never have a collie because I like lay-ins and not doing anything. So they're completely the wrong breed for me. It's certainly not something against the breed. It's just they're not for my energy level, shall we say, or whatever.
No.
But I did grow up with one. My granddad had one. And he was just a hobby collie. He didn't work, but my granddad was very keen to keep him busy, so he taught him to collect litter, and Benji absolutely
Wow.
loved it. So they used to go out for miles and miles and miles in Dorset and litter pit, and Benji would collect litter and put it straight in the bin, and that was his job, and he absolutely
Oh,
loved it.
wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I have very, very fond memories, even if I couldn't see myself living with one. I mean, never say never. If one landed on my doorstep, I would never turn it away, but I wouldn't go out and buy a collie puppy personally. I
Mm.
have had some interesting kind of clients. I find them quite a spectrum. Actually, I saw more of them when I was offering puppy training than now in behavior modification. And I remember two sort of polar opposites. So I had one dog called Oti, and I mention him because he was like the most anti-collie I've ever seen. I remember going over to teach him some basic agility, and all he wanted to do was sit on my lap. He just was like, "No, I'm not. I don't identify as a collie. No, I'm just going to sit here and ask for a tummy rub." He was lush, proper pet home collie. And then I had completely the opposite. which I had to refer. This was back when I was only offering training, had to refer on to a clinical animal behaviourist because I had this lady order a collie from a farm delivered in a cardboard box to
Oh my
her
God.
front door,
Oh no.
riddled with worms and fleas, and they lived in central Winchester, and this dog just
Oh
basically, the
no.
second he left the house, he was like, "What the fuck is going on?"
Mm.
So I have really seen both ends of the spectrum, and it's funny how I don't really know any other breed that I've seen so massively diverse in terms of personality. Would you say that that's fair, or do you think it's just my experience?
No, no, that's definitely the case. I mean, you've got like you said, a very, very calm, friendly Labrador type who Ozzy
Mm,
pretty much is that actually. He'd rather lie down than do anything.
mm,
And then right at the other end of the scale, you've got very that I say sort of high drive, but they're dogs that want to be into everything. Anything that they have tend to have a very high prey drive. They want to be on the go all the time. They often struggle with certain things. They're more likely to struggle. And I think the reason is with collies more than any other breed because they're so used in so many different dog sports. So you've kind of got different lines, almost 3 or 4 different lines of collies. So you've got the show lines that are very laid back on the whole. They're very used to being handled because they have to be handled. So
mhm,
a lot of collies don't really enjoy being poked or prodded. You have a lot of collies that have issues with the vet, but show lines, because they have to be felt over in the show ring, then, and if the dog wasn't able to be felt over in the show ring, they wouldn't breed from it.
mhm,
So you do have very laid back collies that are used to being handled and don't really need so much exercise and management as the other types. You've then got the agility sort of dog type and dog sport type that is very often sort of lightweight for agility, quite whippet like in some cases, often
mhm,
short coated, that they use for agility, that are just bred for agility. And obviously, if they weren't quick and they weren't light and they weren't able to get the good scores in agility, they wouldn't be bred from. So, this is why you've got the very quick collies. They need a lot of exercise, but they're generally fairly resilient. They're not difficult to own, I don't think. They're often quite nice dogs. And then you've got the working dogs that live predominantly on farms. They're just owned by sort of people that breed them to work on sheep. So you often get these sort of types in Wales, Ireland, and up in Scotland, but other
mm,
places as well. They haven't had to be bred to be nice with people because they don't need to be nice with people. They're just
mhm,
either out in the field with the shepherd or they're back at home, either in a kennel or just lying around the farmhouse. They don't have to be nice to people. They don't have to be nice to other dogs, and they don't have to cope with traffic. So these dogs, they've been bred just to be out in the quiet, the peace and countryside with the shepherd or the family. They've not really come across traffic. They don't have to be nice with people and they don't have to be nice with other dogs. Whereas all the other lines, the agility ones and the show lines, they come into contact with other dogs and lots of people. So and they wouldn't be bred from if they weren't able to cope with that. So it's the working lines dogs that go to live in pet homes that cause the most issues because often then they're not bred to be particularly sociable or to be able to
yeah,
cope with a lot of other things in life in pet homes.
and in my experience as well, they're kind of a lot of accidental litters and stuff as well, aren't they? They're just like, oh yeah, my boy got on with my girl, and then you've got no health testing, you've got no temperament testing,
No.
and then I talk to the owners and they say, oh yeah, no, well they just lived outside in the barn, so they never really saw people, and you're like, oh my god, this is just clusterfuck of a situation basically in terms of what you want in a puppy. But unfortunately, again, from what I hear, these are the ones that you can get same day, 200 quid from John down the road. Whereas if you
Yeah.
want one of these stunning, really robust, sort of pet home type collies, there's going to be a waiting list, and it's hard, isn't
Yeah,
it? It's
and
really
the
hard.
breeders will ask more questions, but don't you shouldn't be put off by that because if a breeder's asking questions, then it means they're going to be a really good breeder. But yeah, you're exactly right about the working lines. They don't usually do. They tend to do genetic tests now, but they wouldn't be doing hip tests. And hip scoring is so important when you're getting a collie because so many have hip issues. And I think on the farms, I think because collies rarely, so if you have a collie with hip issues, you're not really going to notice it on a day-to-day basis because they just enjoy running and being outside and jumping and doing stuff and throwing balls and well, they don't throw the balls, but they love catching the balls. And you wouldn't notice that your collie had hip problems. The only thing you'd really notice would be the behaviour. And so when collies live on farms, the owners don't really notice necessarily that they've
Mm.
probably got hip issues, and it's certainly not really an issue for them because if they have one with hip issues, then they're probably just not going to breed that one again necessarily, but they're not, it's going to be hard for them to know, I think, and they would probably sell on because they wouldn't work sheep very well. And the other thing to think about dogs that are bred on farms as well is that they're often bred in a kennel outside or in a barn, which means that they don't get to hear any of the normal household things that go on. So,
Mm.
washing machine, vacuum cleaner, noises in the kitchen, the TV. And even if they're brought in every so often, then it's still not enough really to get used to all these noises. And they're just used to a nice quiet life in the kennel, out with the farmer. And so you really have to bear that in mind as well. So
Yeah,
often puppies
absolutely.
that, and the other thing as well, sorry to go on, the other thing as well
That's
is
okay.
that these collies that are kept and puppies that are kept outside, they have trouble settling in normal houses as well, in pet homes, because they're just sort of outside on their own. It's all pretty boring, and then the human comes out and everything's really exciting, and they jump around the human and it's all wonderful, and then the human goes again, and then the dogs settle. Whereas when they're then taken to a pet home at sort of 8 weeks plus, they're with humans all the time. And so they've kind of been programmed to be really excited around people, and they're with them all the time. They never get time on their own, sort of away. And so they really struggle to settle. And I think that's where a lot of the issues come from in pet
Yeah,
homes
that's a
as well.
really good point. Yeah, I'd never really thought of it like that, but I think that's a really, really good point. I mean, I think we'll probably kind of come back to this at the end in terms of leaving people with a kind of a checklist, if you like, if they're kind of going to pursue getting a collie in the future or whatever, or trying to understand their collie now, because I think all of these things paint a very clear picture, don't they? So,
Yeah.
give us an overview of the sort of cases that you see. What is your life like as a collie specialist?
Okay. So the cases I see, there's a lot of car chasing. That's a real issue with collies. In a recent study, I think they found 25% of collies chase traffic.
Wow.
And
Hmm.
by traffic chasing, I mean they'll lunge and bark at traffic as it goes past, spin on the lead, nearly pull owners over. It's really dangerous. So that's a big issue. And once it's started, it's a habit that's quite difficult to break. It takes quite a long time and a lot of training. So I see a lot of those. I see a lot of aggression cases, mainly from working lines, because, as I said earlier, they're just not trained really to be sociable with people or other dogs. And also, I think a lot of the aggression cases, in fact, a lot of all the cases I see, probably 80% are caused by pain in some way.
Mm.
Not necessarily caused by, but pain is a contributing factor. And there's been a few studies. There was one study that looked at dogs that do agility, and border collies were more likely to be injured in agility than any other breed. So pain is a bit of an issue with collies. We have the sort of genetic issues, so the hip and elbow problems. Sometimes see them with spine issues, but I think as well, because collies are so active and they love running, they love jumping, they just are more prone to issues. So I see aggression. I see quite a lot of aggression, whether it's hereditary or caused by pain, or just because collies aren't particularly, resilient. So sometimes it can be a little thing. So for instance, I had one collie where they were walking it in quite a sort of nice countryside area, but it was really busy. And there was a gate on the path, a sort of one bar gate that everyone had to duck under to get past each other. It's quite a busy path. And the collie happened to go under it at exactly the same time as somebody coming the other way ducked under as well. and she was
Right.
terrified by this person suddenly ducking towards her. And so we had an issue with fear and aggression towards people and reactivity towards people after that. So
Wow. Just from
that's
that
another
one
case.
incident.
Yeah, yeah, it can be very
Wow.
little. Another dog I saw, the owners took him to took her to a sheepdog trial, and there was a male dog there that was particularly sniffing round her and being quite persistent, and the owner didn't really realise that that was going to be a problem. And she'd always been fine with other dogs before then, but after that, she was very scared around other dogs and very aggressive, wanting to get them away from her. So that didn't happen again. So yeah, it can be they can be affected by little things, especially if they happen during puppyhood and adolescence. I think once you get to about sort of 2.5, 3 years, those sort of things don't affect them anymore. But I
Yeah.
mean, there's other things obviously like being attacked by another dog that can cause all sorts of aggression issues with other dogs when the dogs sort of become really fearful. So yeah, a lot of aggression cases which are usually related to one of those things, either pain, genetics, or an horrible incident. I see a lot of sound sensitive collies, and they're particularly
Yeah,
prone to
they're the
that.
ones that I've seen as well.
Yeah, yeah, which is always difficult to work with, and again, that's often related to pain. Not always, but often. A lot of collies with repetitive behaviours, so shadow chasing, spinning, don't fly snapping occasionally. I don't tend to see too many with the other repetitive behaviours, but those three can be an issue. What others do I see? Yeah, a lot of those. I think they're the main ones. It's sort of the
Yeah.
aggression, car chasing, sound
And
sensitivity, and repetitive
mm,
behaviours. Yeah, yeah. Don't see many. I'd like to say actually, don't see many collies with separation anxiety. In fact, I've never seen one, and I don't think that's because they don't get anxious. I think that when owners leave, they don't do anything that causes an issue. So they don't bark and whine necessarily. They don't destroy things. They just sort of suffer in silence. So I think that's really important
mm,
for people to know that just because their collie doesn't make a lot of noise or doesn't do anything that's causing a problem doesn't mean they don't get anxious when they're left. But it isn't
yeah.
something that I see that often in collies.
I totally hear what you're saying. I often have customers say to me, "Oh, well, he doesn't bark when I leave, so he's fine." And it's kind of like that's not really the barometer we need to use to measure. I
No,
can very much
exactly.
imagine a collie pacing or spinning or, fly snapping or any of the other behaviors that you've mentioned. And unless you were actively recording them, you wouldn't know that was happening, would you?
No,
It's
no.
interesting how you say about this sort of what we call in behavior single event learning, isn't it? So for anyone listening, that's kind of something so important that happens once that it's enough to kind of completely change the perception of that thing.
Yeah,
I worked with a colleague with noise sensitivity who I think he heard a bird scarer once, and it was enough to change his entire outlook to going outside,
yeah,
long term.
yeah,
Changed his entire relationship with being on lead, being out on a walk, this particular area. So, I mean, if anybody sort of has a colleague that's listening to this and is worried about that, then I would say get in touch with someone like Rachel who can help you build that resilience early on so that if they're a bit older and that does happen, they're much more likely to bounce back from it. Would you think that's fair
yeah.
to say?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it is, I mean, I'm seeing about 3 or 4 collies at the moment with that exact issue, bird scarers going off quite close to them when they weren't expecting it. Yeah, and that can be and fireworks as well, the usual fireworks. Not so much thunder with collies. It's normally the loud one-off sudden noises. But I also see a
Mm,
lot of collies with a completely different sort of sound sensitivity that is related to sort of noises caused by humans in the home. So things like
yeah.
yeah, sort of moving fingers and the rustling that causes sneezing, coughing, cupboards being opened and shut, microwave beeps. Yeah, funny noises
Wow.
inside. Tapping on things if you tap on a table, lids off food cartons, things like that. Yeah, that I often see in them as well,
Do
which
you have
is
a
quite unusual.
theory Do you have a theory about where that might come from sort of an evolutionary perspective in terms of what they were bred to do, or the traits that they have?
Not really. The only, I mean, there's quite a long, detailed article about it on my website where I really looked into it, and they are very sound sensitive anyway because they're bred to work on hillsides and where it's quiet. They don't particularly
Mm.
hear a lot of noise, so there is that side of it. They don't have to be good. It's not like a Labrador or a gun dog that has to be used to gunshots. They've not been bred for that. So there's that side of it. But I think this strange not being able to cope with little noises in the home, it could come from the fact that they have been brought up in sort of quiet kennel environments, more likely to have been that than other breeds perhaps are more likely to have been brought up in the home. But I do wonder if there's certain hearing, what do you call it, conditions that people can have that are called, I think one's called misophonia and another one's called, what's the other one? Can't quite remember now, it's in my article. And one of them causes little sounds like that can cause pain in people, and the other
Oh,
one
okay.
sounds like that can be really annoying. So some people really struggle with hearing somebody else eat or clicking their fingers or
Yeah.
something like that. One
Yeah.
of the noises really annoy them. And I do wonder, and that can be genetic in people. And so I do wonder if somehow along the line we've ended up breeding into collies something unintentional. And the other thing is, of course, pain can cause, if you're in pain, then these little things, if they make you jump, then that can cause pain and that can cause sensitivity to those sort of noises. And if it's happened once or twice and it's made you jump, then with collies being sort of a bit less resilient than other breeds, then potentially that's made them have an aversion to that noise. It's quite hard to know.
Yeah.
I mean, they are very prone to repetitive behaviours as well. So you've got the kind of, it sort of gets you thinking about being on the neurodivergent spectrum as well a
Yeah.
little bit, because people on the spectrum can be more sensitive to sounds and they can be more prone to
Mhm.
certain repetitive behaviours, and it does make you wonder, but there's no evidence about that at all in collies, or there's starting to be some research about it in dogs, which is going to be interesting, I think. But
Yeah, I was
but
gonna
yeah,
say I expect that's something that will continue to emerge. I it wouldn't surprise me if
yeah,
that's like quite a line of inquiry for a lot of researchers at the moment. All
yeah,
right, so maybe you can, to be honest, this next question we could probably be here for 3 hours talking about, I expect, but maybe you've got like a real hotshot example that makes you think. Obviously, collies have this like huge reputation for being super quick and super smart. Do you think they are as smart as their reputation precedes them to be?
I think they are pretty smart. I mean, you could say there's been quite a few studies, as you'll know, looking at intelligence in dogs, and it is thought that collies probably appear to be more intelligent because they've been bred to be very focused on a human, and they've been bred to take cues from that human, really small cues from a whistle or movement, just the movement of the person. Collies pay a lot of attention to people, so you can almost control a collie just by moving. So when you're working sheep, you don't really need, especially in the early stages where they're close to you, you don't really need a verbal cue or a whistle. You can just move and get the dog to do things. So they're very, very tuned in to the handler, and that can make them.
Have you got a friend come to join you?
Yeah, they're all here.
Ah, they said they missed their cue. You're late, guys.
I've got the treats here. When the doorbell goes, they all get treats and then they stop barking. Good doggies.
Ah, okay, cool. So they've got
Everyone,
a
oh.
system going.
Yeah, yeah, they do a few barks and then they come over for their treats, and then by then, hopefully, the
Great job,
postman
guys.
has gone. Good doggies, good dogs.
Oh,
Excellent.
lovely. I think, you've hit the nail on the head there. I think it's hard for us to measure, the capacity for intelligence if we're really going to be super picky about it. But obviously their ability to like focus on a task is really, really great, and
Yeah,
their like attention to detail is superior to a lot of dogs. I mean, I've got a bloodhound and you have to ask him 25 times before he even realizes where you are. And obviously that's not a problem for collies, and that's exactly down to selective breeding, right? So that they can
yeah,
focus on
yeah.
herding and all the other things that they need to be able to do to work on a farm.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with collies as well, I think intelligence, how intelligent they are, depends on how you measure it, doesn't it? So you would say
Yeah, of
if you're
course.
measuring if you're measuring intelligence to be being able to follow a scent and find somebody, then bloodhounds would be really intelligent. They'd be
Yeah.
top. Whereas many people interpret intelligence as being able to learn something very quickly and being able to respond to cues from owners. So collies are naturally good at that. But I do think, as well as that, they do have a huge capacity for learning a lot of things. So, for instance, there's been a few papers on collies that learn to have a name for a toy. So you can some owners have laid out like over 100 toys, and the collie will fetch a toy from that. They'll say go find the pig, and the collie will find the pig. They'll say go find the, I don't know, spider, and they'll go and get the spider. So I do
Just to
think,
interrupt you, Rachel, Benji the collie that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode who litter picked, this was actually his first escapade, if you like, was named toys.
wow,
And there was a television program, we actually looked at it when we were at Lincoln, called Test Your Pet in the early 2000s. And Benji placed second, and he knew 450 odd toys by
oh
name.
my god,
I will
that's
say though, he didn't
amazing.
have a 100% success rate, because when he got excited, you were getting any old bloody toy thrown at you, but whatever.
That is a
So
good
I just
point.
wanted to jump in and throw him his flowers, because he was one of the OGs in terms of that sort of skill. Sorry,
Wow,
carry on.
that's amazing. No, and that's another point actually, that sometimes collies are really hard to train. So, for instance, when I was doing my Karen Pryor Association qualification, for that you had to have the dog you were working with who you could teach all sorts of things using clicker training. So I had Gail as my dog back then, but because she had already learnt so many things and she was already responding to me by, and I'd done a thing with her where and it's not great training, but I didn't mind because I used to like it. So I used to say a thing to her like, what can you do? And she would go through her whole repertoire of tricks, and then I'd reward her for it. So it was really hard to get really focused and do the very, very precise clicker mechanics to complete the course with a dog that would get overexcited and just throw anything at me. So I had to go right down to really low value treats so that she wasn't getting so wound up and could actually think. And that's a really good point about collies. They can sometimes be so over enthusiastic that they're just not thinking, and you do have to, if you're not getting anywhere, you do have to think, okay, are the is the treat value or the reward value too high? Am I using a ball that is getting them so excited they just can't think? Am I using really high value treats that they are just so excited and trying so hard that they just can't think properly? So you sometimes do with them have to come down in value and work with something a lot lower. Yeah,
Yeah.
so he was really hard to work with for that.
We had to do a bit of niche troubleshooting with Benji, and obviously this was because when I was a kid, we used to just absolutely love the toy game. It was the best thing ever. But my granddad had quite a thick, like Gloucester accent, so if you didn't say the toy's name in exactly the same way that my granddad said it in his accent, with his like, what's the word I'm trying to say? His sort of dialect, Benji would look at
Pronunciation.
you like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And then you'd put on the accent, and then he'd be like, "Oh yeah, no, I got it." So,
No, yeah.
yeah, that's just a funny little anecdote. But I guess that's that attention to detail, right? He's like, "Is that
Mm.
definitely what you're asking me for, or am I, I need you to be specific, lady."
Yes, yeah, and probably how
Okay.
you're standing too, because collies just look at you all the time and pay so much attention to body language. So,
Yeah,
yeah, could have been so
all those
many
things
things.
you he taught me a lot when I was a kid, because he also, so he came from a farm, and my granddad was, God love him, like miss him every day, but he didn't hold any prisoners, and he wanted Benji to be a high drive working dog, and he did not need him to be sociable. And as kids, the first thing we wanted to do was pet the lovely puppy, and immediately the dog said, absolutely not, get away from me. And this is what I find really funny these days, because when I have people say to me, oh, the dog's growled at the child, what do we do? It happened to me
Mm,
as a child, and my granddad said, well, you won't do that again, will you? And that was it. You just gave
yeah,
Benji his space. Great. He lived out the rest of his life without any conflict, because we all learned early on, don't go near Benji. So I learned
mm,
dog bite strategies from, or dog bite avoidance, shall we say, from Benji when I was a kid.
that's
All
good.
right. Enough about him, lovely Benji. So, who would you say is the correct human for a border collie? And conversely, who would you say, obviously there's always nuance to these conversations, so I'm not expecting you to say, categorically this is a yes and this is a no, but broadly speaking, if you were to throw a dome over it, who would you say is the right sort of home and the right sort of human, and who would you say this is not the right dog for you?
Yeah, okay. So I think a collie owner would need, particularly if they're going sort of the agility farm bred end of the spectrum, you would have to be quite an active person because they need quite a lot of exercise. You really need a big garden as well, because I see a lot of issues with collies that, because really when a collie's young, unless you've got a lot of space or you've got access to a dog park, or you live really in the middle of nowhere where there's no other dogs, which there aren't many places in the UK that are like that
No.
anymore, then it's going to be difficult to let a young collie off the lead. They're all right till they're about 4 months because they naturally stick with you. But then at 5 to 6 months, all of adolescence kicks in and they just want to be off investigating everything. So there's not many collies that you can trust off lead to come back when called. They all go through a phase where they have a brilliant recall, then it all goes. So because I think it's wrong to let a dog off the lead that you might not be able to get back, then it's always better to have them on a lead. And I think young collies, and by young I mean sort of up to about 2.5 year olds, they really need to be able to have some time where they can run. It doesn't have to be on a walk, because it's better to have them on leads on walks often, but they really need to be able to run. And I think unless you've got a big garden or you've got the financial capability to take them to a dog field, a couple of 2 or 3 times a week, then there's going to be a few problems, because they just really need that. They need it for development and mental health as well as physical health. So there's that side of it. They need quite a few walks. I mean, mine have about an hour a day, which is fine now they're a bit older. And probably a young sort of adolescent collie might need a bit more than that just to help them settle in the home. So you've got to be active. You've also got to be prepared to put in the work when they're young, because particularly the first sort of, you normally get a puppy when it's 8 weeks, so those first 4 weeks up to 12 weeks are so important for having a collie. So if you can't devote a lot of time to them at that age, because that's so important for getting the socialization in, and often these collies, especially farm bred ones, won't have had much, they won't have seen much. So you've got those 4 weeks before the end of the socialization period at 12 weeks to really get them out and about and see things.
Yeah.
But you have to be so careful with that bit as well, because it's so easy to overwhelm them. So
Yeah.
one of the issues that I see with a lot of collies is the car chasing, and I think that happens because they have their injections, they go out. No, going back a few steps. So owners will often take them out and carry them round, which is fantastic, and you definitely should do that before they've had their injections. But be really careful about the kind of, and traffic really comes into it at this point. Be really careful about the sort of traffic you're exposing them to. So for instance, when Ozzy was little, there was no sign that he was worried about traffic at all. And this is a really big thing with collie. You really have to think about the traffic and the tendency to lunge and bark at traffic. And so I was carrying him round, and it was a really quiet road. And then this van came by really fast, and it really scared
Hmm.
him. And so for a few weeks after that, I really had to take a step back and just take him to see traffic at a distance, going slowly, and gradually work back up. So you've kind of got to be prepared for these things with collies. You've got to be really careful and make sure you give them the socialization, but watch them all the time and make sure they're not becoming scared, because that can lead to further issues. You've also, so you need a big garden. I mean, small homes, really small houses, particularly with children in, are difficult because, as you were saying
Mhm.
earlier about your granddad's dog that nipped if anyone went too close, collies do tend to like their own space, so they need
Mhm.
somewhere to get away from all the noise, especially if they've been brought up in a quiet home or outside. And if they can't have that, if there's nowhere in the house where they can just get away and have nobody interfering with them at all, then that can cause problems as well. You tend to get resource guarding, aggression towards children. So you've kind of got to have a, I would say a two up, two down isn't an ideal space for a collie. It's probably okay if you don't have children and you have a big garden, you're prepared to take them out a lot. But yeah, that's something worth thinking about. Cities, again, collies really struggle in cities. They're often very fearful of traffic. Often the gardens are smaller. Collies can become so sensitized to traffic that just hearing it from outside can
Yeah.
be enough to send them scurrying to their crate every time a motorbike or a van goes by. Or alternatively, they can become so obsessed by watching it out the windows that that kind of takes over. So although city homes can be good in a way that you often have parks and space for the dogs to run around that you don't really have in the countryside so much, which sounds crazy, but it's the case. I mean, where I live, we don't really have many parks or anywhere to take dogs. It's just on roads and don't even have
Mm.
that many footpaths. So, but yeah, there is the car chasing issue can be a really big problem. So you kind of got to have the time to put in, and that time goes on right from after 12 weeks up to when they're about 2 years old. You can get a lot of,
Yeah.
yeah, because they're still going through adolescence, you can get a lot of behaviour problems that you kind of need to monitor and avoid. They need a lot of management in the house because they can be quite chewy and they can be very bitey puppies too. So
Mm.
you need to be prepared to be nibbled quite a lot with razor sharp teeth. Yeah, so I think that's the main things. And I think you've also got to be the sort of person, ideally, that's willing to put in research into where the puppy's coming from and
Yeah.
checking out parents, go to meet the parents before you pick up the puppy, make sure that they've had all the health tests. So that's really important with collies. There's so many issues, mainly hips and epilepsy, but so there's no health test for epilepsy, unfortunately, but there is a Border Collie fitting database that has, so that any owner who wants to register their dog on it for having epilepsy can do so. And I'd encourage
Okay.
anyone listening, if they've got a collie that has epilepsy, look out the database. I'll give it to you afterwards for so
Yeah.
people have got the link, and just add in their collie, because that's so helpful then. So if you're looking for a puppy, you can put the parents into the database. It's not easy because you have to download the spreadsheet and then do a search, but it's possible. You can put the parents into the database and see if any other offspring from those parents have epilepsy, because it is genetic. We just haven't identified the gene yet, unfortunately, that can cause
Mm.
it. But that's worth knowing about. So yeah, please add your collies to that database if they've had epilepsy. And then not only can future owners look up dogs on their parents and grandparents, breeders use it to determine who to, what stud dog to use and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's really useful. So be prepared to put in a bit of research about where it's coming from. And I would try and avoid farms in Wales if you want a collie as a pet. Yeah, look for
Yeah, that
sport
was that
homes
was
or breeders.
actually going to be my next question. So many of them from Wales as well. I don't know
Mm.
if you're aware of this, but when I wrote my book, I found out why, and it's because the farmers were actually incentivized to breed puppies. At one
Oh,
point, I would need to find you the exact reference, but
oh gosh.
I don't know if they still are, but they were subsidized or they were they were heavily encouraged to breed dogs as additional income in
Oh
Wales at a
gosh.
certain point in the
Oh,
last
shame.
20 years or so. And
Yeah.
obviously this has the consequence that it has done. And I'm really glad
Mhm.
that you've mentioned that, because as much as I don't see them like you do, working on the Dogs Trust behaviour support line, I managed to collect enough of my own brain stored internal data about how many dogs were coming out of farms, like you say, particularly in Wales, and the types of problems that were occurring. And I think just because, well, it's hard because I would say if a puppy's cheap, then that's a problem anyway. But I think people see them as easily accessible,
Mm.
affordable, and then people say, oh well, I'm quite active. I like to go for a run, and it's like that doesn't mean that you need to get a feral sheepdog from Wales. Um,
No,
so
no,
yeah, I'm really
definitely not.
glad. I'm really glad that you also sort of share my view is based on experience. It's not
Oh
just
yeah,
based on the fact that I
same.
don't think they're for me or whatever. It definitely is a
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
isn't it?
It is definitely. And another thing to be aware of at the moment as well is that there's a lot of breeders breeding for colour rather than
Mm.
temperament or health. So
Mhm.
I think and I can understand why people like unusual coloured collies, and I have Aussie who's an unusual colour, but I think it's really important to bear in mind that if they're not black and white, if they're more one of the more unusual colours, merle is okay, reds are okay, red and white. It's more the sort of you've got the Aussie's colours sort of golden, you've got lilac, you've got all sorts of other
God, I
seal.
didn't know
Can't
they were
remember
doing
the others.
lilac border collies these days.
Yeah,
Lilac
yeah, the
everything.
lilac.
Lilac bloody
Yeah, yeah,
bulldogs.
yeah. I know. And so you
Um,
do have to bear in mind. So if you are drawn to that sort of collie, which I can understand why people are, just bear in mind that you really check with the breeders that they're doing the health tests. And for the health test, they need to be hip scored. That's really important. They need the genetic test, which is a case where you send off a blood test to one of the panels of genetic testing companies online. And there's a whole list of conditions that collies have that I can't remember all of them, but you can find them online quite easily. Eye testing is quite important with collies as well. The parents should be eye tested ideally, and hearing is another issue that we tend to get with collies.
mm.
So just bear in mind that if you're getting a coloured, an unusually, I mean this goes with all collies. All collies. If you're going to buy a collie, make sure that parents have been health tested, both of them. And if parents just say, oh, yeah, they're health tested, ask what the health tests are and ask to see hip scores, because a dog, they could say, oh, yeah, my dog's hip scored, but that doesn't mean that the results were
It was a
good
good
from the
one.
hip score.
Yeah,
It could
yeah.
be anything. So ask about that. Bear in mind that coloured ones, also, the temperament might not be as good because that's not what the breeder's breeding for. Because it's quite hard to get unusual coloured collies. Your data your own gene pool is very small, and some less good breeders are breeding just for colour because these dogs fetch a lot more money. So you're sort of looking
Yeah.
300 to 700 for a puppy in Wales, whereas you're looking sort of 2,000 plus for an unusual coloured collie. So
Which,
yeah, it's
I
not.
mean, I'm
Not
not a
good.
geneticist, but it's just a gene mutation, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
crazy.
I
That
know.
is crazy. You've covered loads of my questions already, and without me even asking them, Rachel. It's like you've condensed all of the questions. Okay, so what have you learned about working with collies that has changed the way that you approach dogs in general? Is there anything, or like the other clients that you have that aren't collies? Is there something you've carried with you?
This is a really hard question. I was thinking about this. I think I think because everything with collies is more intense than with other breeds. So everything, yeah, it's a really difficult question. I guess the main things that I'd say are dogs aren't stubborn or spiteful. So if you're trying to get your dog to do something, and this doesn't necessarily just apply to collies, but I do hear a lot of collie owners saying, "Oh, they're being stubborn or spiteful, and they're doing this to get their own back on me because I did this." dogs don't do that. They don't understand. They don't have the mental capacity to be stubborn and try and piss you off on purpose.
Mhm.
So I think if a dog's not doing something and you can't see any reason why it wouldn't be doing something. So for instance, if you've got a dog that stops on walks and you can't see why they'd be stopping, and you think, right, well, they're just stopping because they don't want to go that way, and that's annoying because I want to go that way, then just think, is it that, or is it because something's hurting them somewhere? I think pain is such a big thing in so many of the problem behaviours that I see in collies and other breeds.
Mhm.
So think, are they doing that because they don't want to go that way, or are they doing it because something's hurting and they've just had enough on this walk and they want to stop? Are they doing it because there's a dog further up that barks at the gate that they're scared of?
Mhm. Mhm.
Always think, I always remember Sarah Fisher's amazing, so sad that we lost her, her amazing quote:
Yeah.
question everything but never the dog is always right. So
Mhm.
dogs do things for a reason, and it's not to annoy us or get their own back. They're doing things because they're feeling something, and we need to really think about that. So the other one that I've had recently was an owner said, look, the dog's been out all this time to go to the toilet, and then I bring it in and then it goes in its crate and poos. It's doing it to annoy me. And it's not that. It's that there might be lots of reasons why the dog's doing that, but it won't be to annoy the owner.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the main thing with dogs. You've just got to really look into why they're doing things, and also be really aware that when a dog's reacting and it's really scared or really aggressive for whatever reason or really frustrated, they're not ignoring us. They just can't hear us.
Mhm.
Their brain is saying, this is a threat, this is a threat. It's screaming at them. And their brain's not even listening to us talking. And so
Mhm.
it's kind of thinking about why a dog's doing something, why they're not listening to you. And yeah, and if you've got problems, then yeah, see a behaviourist rather than saying, oh, it's just because they're being stubborn. I hear that so often. You must as well. They're being stubborn. They won't walk. They won't leave the house because they're being stubborn. And
Yeah, or like you say, or it's to punish me, or it's blah 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 blah, and yeah, that's what I always say to people. There's always an explanation past some sort of meta human concept that we've come up with to explain the situation. Aside from recently, when a vet that I work with told me that one of her customers thinks the dog's seeing poltergeists. People
oh,
come up with
well, you
the
never know.
who's.
Never
I was going to
know.
say, who's to say that he's definitely not Rachel, but
Well,
yeah,
exactly.
we 9
Yeah.
times out of 10 there is an explanation. We just have to dig, and myself and Rachel, we might not get it right away, but that's what the whole experience is for, to just keep uncovering things until we work out what the problem is. And I totally
Yeah,
agree with you.
exactly.
Question, like you say, question everything.
Yeah, yeah. I think as well, that's something that's just reminded me as well. I think with collies, because their responses are so quick to everything. So if something scares them, then you see this exaggerated response that you may not see so much in other breeds. Then you really have to think about punishment and why not to use it, because
Mm.
that's caused so many problems in collies that I've seen. So for instance, there was a collie that I'm seeing recently that oh, he's just got so many red flags for gastrointestinal pain. He's got runny
Mhm.
poos, eats everything, chews things. Just really fearful. Can't be left on his own because he just can't cope on his own. And I think it's because his tummy's hurting him so much.
Mhm.
And the owners had been using a bark collar to stop him from barking in the night
Mhm.
because he was just up all night barking. And now we've got the issue that he'll toilet in his crate overnight because he can't bark to let them know that he needs to go out. So, I mean, you just never know the effect that using these horrible collars are going to have. There's another dog that I'm seeing who, I mean, this isn't a collar, but I see quite a few collies on farms, and there was a collie that the sheep had electric round their fence, and it was a young collie that the owner wanted to eventually work on sheep, but the collie had got into the field where the sheep were and caught itself on the electric fence and had a shock. But he didn't think the electric fence was the problem, the dog. He thought it was the sheep. And so he was
Right.
petrified of sheep. And that's just
Oh,
another one. And and obviously
poor
I've seen
thing.
owners that the dog would jump up them, because collies have problems with impulse control when they're young. They do jump
Mhm.
up because they get so excited and they can't control themselves, and they've been bred to have this impulsive reaction when if sheep moves, they go by and herd it back. And I had a dog that the owners had shocked him for jumping up people that came in the house. And the
Mm.
dog just saw that somebody came in their house and he got a shock. So he was terrified of
Yeah.
people. And yeah, there's just so many issues with these horrible aversive devices, shock collars, prong collars, all those sort of things. So I guess that's another thing that I'd really want to highlight from doing this too.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it before, but I expect border collies are slightly overrepresented as well in terms of aversive devices. And I'm not a farmer hater or anything, but just thinking kind of logically about how these things work, I can imagine a lot of people have done things the old school way for quite a long time. And, they might recommend to do it to to somebody to put a collar on and that sort of thing. And yeah, I wonder how overrepresented they are in that group because I have never seen an e-collar actually out in the wild. I saw one for the first time when I was teaching the other day, and we had it as a prop. And before and since then, I have never seen one. Do you see them a lot?
Not really, no, to be fair. I don't. And
Oh,
it's
that's
not
good.
really farmers that recommend things like that. Farmers, I think because farm dogs, they have such a different relationship with their owners that they
Mm,
do tend to behave better because everything's calmer. They kind of, so I don't think farmers see too many behavioural problems with collies,
okay.
mainly because they've got their needs met and all that sort of thing. But no, the aversive devices come from unqualified, unethical trainers, not the farmers, you have to say. So, yeah.
Like one that we shall not name, very close to you in Lincoln. And if anybody would
Mm.
like to do some digging on Google, you'll work out exactly who I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to round up, Rachel. So, what would you like your takeaway message from today to be for listeners to remember about our lovely border collies?
Okay, my take home message is don't blame everything on herding. Collies,
Cool.
things like traffic chasing is very, very, very rarely herding. I have never seen a traffic chasing collie that I think was herding the traffic. Collies aren't stupid. They know the difference between a big metal inanimate object and sheep. So that's not a cause of herding. Does not cause car chasing. I also have seen so many cases where they've gone to other trainers and then come to me because they couldn't get the right help. And a lot of trainers tend to blame everything on herding. So
Mm,
oh, they're chasing and biting children because it's herding. I don't think that's herding either. Not in
yeah.
most cases. I think children are very animated. They smell differently. They sound differently. Collies have
Yeah.
really acute senses. I think, yeah. So if a trainer's saying to you it's herding, then just think, is it actually herding? I think it's so easy
Mhm.
to just, and the problem is when people say, oh, it's just herding, it's just collies, then it's a get out clause. It means they're not trying to resolve the problem. They're just saying, oh, it's just a collie, they do that.
Yeah.
Whereas it's not usually herding. I
Mhm.
can say that. I think when collies nip runners and joggers, that's not usually herding either. It's
Mhm.
fear, I think, or fear, or just the wanting to run with somebody. It's sort of like social
Mhm.
facilitation. Somebody's running and they want to go and run next to them. It's
Mhm.
it's not herding, I don't think, in most cases. So
Interesting.
yeah.
The in the Kay Lawrence webinar, I did a little understanding collies thing a while back and then never saw a bloody collie again. But anyways, that's just how life works. She says it's a lot about the speed at which something moves and that kind of innate drive, just not herding necessarily, but to
No.
control, which I can kind of see is a valid point that, something's moving at speed. Hang on a minute. I'm going to try and take control of this situation. Do you think that's fair?
I tend to disagree with that a little bit because I've really gone
Interesting.
into this. And I've done a article on the website you might be interested in. It's more for other trainers and professionals than owners. But I really dug down into all the different emotions that we know collies can feel and did loads of research around papers. I think that they just like chasing things. I don't think it's necessarily the herding thing of wanting to
Hmm.
control movement. They can. So in homes, they can want. So, for instance, last night we were sat in the lounge. Ozzy was next to me. Flo was in front of the TV on her bed. And Ozzy at one point wanted to. There's a dog came on the telly. He's still not good with dogs on the TV. And he was going to rush up to the TV, and then Flo sort of leapt off her bed with her teeth bared, and he
Mm.
stopped. So she's kind of doing my job for me. But she doesn't like him doing that. But I don't know if it's herding. I think they know how to use their eye to control other dogs. So you often
Hmm.
see that in homes with more than one collie or more than one dog. They'll use their eye and their movement to control other dogs. So they'll sort of go and stand somewhere and stare at the dog and it doesn't want to move past.
Hmm.
But whether that's it's really difficult, and I really want to
Yeah.
know the answer to this, and I'm going to keep going on with searching because I'm not saying these other people are wrong because they have more experience than me, but I think when you break it down scientifically and look at the science and look at all the emotions that
Mm.
we know dogs can feel, I think some of these things are unlikely to be a control of movement and just more likely to be just the same as a Labrador that goes running after somebody. Dogs just like running and chasing. I don't
Hmm.
think it's always a control of
Interesting.
movement. Yeah, so but that's ongoing.
All right. Well, we'll stay posted. I will have a look at your articles and I'll get you to send me the links as well in case anybody's interested. Because I know like some guardians, even if they're not like a professional, they get really in depth, don't they? And they like to study these things. So I will share them.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so actually I will get you to tell everybody out loud where they can find you, where they can find your articles, and if there's anything else you'd like to advertise, is what I was going to say. If there's anything else you'd like to advertise, just plug everything now, and then I can send people to come and get help from you if they need it.
No worries. No, I haven't really got anything ongoing to plug. I don't really do podcasts. Oh, well, I do this podcast. I don't do my own podcast or webinars. I do invited ones, but I don't do webinars. I don't do courses. I should. It's just getting around to doing it, isn't it? But yeah,
Hmm.
come to my website because it's got loads of really useful information. And I'm not somebody who hides it all behind a firewall and says you have to pay for this. So anything that I think can help owners, I put in the blog on my website, which is www.collieconsultant.co.uk. So there's loads of
Perfect.
information in the blog. Yeah, loads of help and different articles about how to train different things and help with different behaviour problems.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's it really. Haven't really got. That's kind of my SEO strategy is be a bit different and help everyone. So
That is totally valid, and we thank you for your service. I'm sure there are many people listening that will be feel very seen, feel very validated, and feel empowered as well now that they have a bit more information. And don't forget,
good.
everybody, that Rachel sees customers online. So if you found this really helpful and you want to know more, then do not hesitate to go over and chat to her. You can still work very effectively with remote behaviourists. So that is my little message for collie owners that might be listening. All right, Rachel, I will let you go. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed it. It's nice. I could talk about collies all day, so it's been
Well, we'll have
lovely.
to do that separately because, I think the hour commute to work is probably as long as people will listen to me talk for. So, all right, thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. See you.
That was the wonderful Rachel Rodgers. You can find her at the Collie Consultant, and I hope you found this really interesting and really helpful, particularly if you are a collie guardian. Don't forget that if you like this episode, you can listen to the other episodes of Talking Sit wherever you get your podcasts. I would hugely appreciate if you could give us a rating or a review because it means that we can reach more people and help more dogs. I say we, it's just myself and lovely Jericho who edits. But anyway, we, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, go and leave me a review or a comment, share with your family and friends, and let's spread the word and help as many animals as we can. Join me next Wednesday for another episode of Talking Sick.